Welcome to the Diocese of Madison This Week on Relevant Radio 1240 AM and 97.3 FM.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Deacon Jim Hoegemeier. I'm a deacon of the Diocese of Madison. I'm also assigned to serve at All Saints Catholic Parish in Berlin. I also serve as the Associate Director of the Apostolate for Persons with Disabilities of the Diocese of Madison. And a new segment on Diocese of Madison this week is an opportunity to have a little conversation with the shepherd of our diocese, Bishop Donald Hying, the 5th Bishop of Madison. Welcome, Bishop Hying.
Oh, thanks so much, Deacon Jim. It's great to be with you and just to talk about our diocese and just plunging into this new reality for me. I feel like I've died and gone to heaven.
So now that you're into your second month, are you still able to use the I'm new excuse?
I think so, because a lot of people I haven't met and most parishes I haven't been to, so everything is relative, but I still think I'm relatively new.
Well, we're happy to have you here. And one thing I thought it'd be interesting to talk about is your journey as a bishop. Not a lot of people will talk about the vocation journey throughout your whole priesthood, but I'd just like to focus on your journey as a bishop because it's gone through a few different transitions in different ways. And first, you were appointed to serve as an auxiliary bishop for the Archdiocese of Milwaukee and were ordained a bishop to serve in that role. How were you informed of that appointment?
Yeah, it's a moment that stands out in my memory very clearly for obvious reasons. It was Tuesday, May 10th, 2011. I'm rector of St. Francis de Sales Seminary in Milwaukee at the time. I'm in my office, quietly minding my own business. My assistant buzzes in and said, the papal nuncio is on the phone for you. And papal nuncio doesn't call you just to see how the weather is or to say hello. So I thought, either I'm really in trouble or I'm going to be a bishop, or I'm really in trouble and I'm going to be a bishop. But it was the nuncio calling and saying that Pope Benedict had appointed me to be the next and the new auxiliary bishop of Milwaukee.
So when you got that news, when you kind of eased into that role, or whether you eased in or didn't ease in, how did it change your ministry? I mean, what things were different? Did you have to take on any new additional responsibilities as an auxiliary bishop?
Yeah, auxiliary bishop is really to a archdiocese what an associate pastor or a parochial vicar would be to a parish and to a pastor. So you really serve in a helping role to the archbishop. In this case, it was Archbishop Listecki. So a large part of my responsibilities certainly included a hefty portion of the confirmations. And in Milwaukee, that was a large number. Also, many meetings, serving in an advisory capacity to the archbishop, and just meeting with people, going out, giving talks, celebrating special masses, blessing things, really serving as an extension and a representative of the archbishop.
So then you also had to give up your position as a rector of the seminary at that time?
I did. There was just a couple-month overlap. I know in some cases, a rector of a seminary has been an auxiliary bishop, but that's rare. And certainly, Archbishop needed help. What triggered my appointment was the appointment of Bishop Callahan as Bishop of La Crosse, because he had been the auxiliary in Milwaukee.
Now, one thing I learned doing a little bit of research is that I think in most cases, when someone's appointed an auxiliary bishop, they're also given a title as bishop of something referred to as a titular diocese. Could you explain what that is?
That's right. So you can see in the word titular the word title. So by canon law, every bishop is required to be the bishop of a diocese. Obviously, an auxiliary is not the bishop of his own diocese because that is what we would call the ordinary. So the ordinary was obviously Archbishop Listecki in Milwaukee. So I was given the titular diocese of Rege. So titular dioceses are dioceses that used to exist in time. They're historical, but no longer exist.
So on paper, were you the ordinary of that diocese?
Yeah, I don't know if you'd use the word ordinary because that implies you have actual canonical authority and juridical power.
Did you have any responsibilities related to that titular diocese?
No, on the contrary, you were forbidden by canon law to actually visit your titular diocese. Mine was somewhere in northern Africa, as far as I could ascertain.
So then, when you were appointed the auxiliary bishop of Milwaukee, did you didn't have a choice over what titular diocese you might have, did you?
Yeah, no, you're just given one. So mine was open because I think a Spanish Dominican bishop had died in auxiliary, and so his titular diocese, fell to me. So when I was appointed a bishop of Gary and became an ordinary, then, Ray J would have been open for another bishop to be assigned. So it's a formality, but it's simply saying that on paper, every bishop, including auxiliaries, is the bishop of some place.
So then when you were actually appointed as the ordinary, the bishop of Gary, you basically relinquish that role as the bishop of the titular diocese.
Yeah, that's right. I don't think it impacted anybody that lived there in any respect.
Now, so we've talked about your role as an auxiliary bishop, and then you're doing that for several years, and then you get another phone call announcing that you've been appointed to be the ordinary of Gary, which is somewhat different because certainly you're moving from the responsibilities of being auxiliary bishop to being the ordinary, the leader of the diocese. But also with Gary being a diocese further away. It's not necessarily just across the diocesan border. It's in a different state. How did you adjust to that? And, what was your reaction when here I am, now I'm going to be an ordinary in a place that I might have so much familiarity with?
Yeah, one of certainly surprise. I think I've always tried to live my vocation as being docile to what I was asked to do. So I heard some very wise advice as a young priest, and it was, don't try to get into an assignment, don't try to get out of an assignment. So just do what you're asked to do and interpret that as the will of God in your life. And there's a great freedom in that surrender and in that docility. So going to Gary was a very different reality. The only person I knew at all was Bishop Dale Melchek, who was my predecessor. So I went there not knowing a soul, and then assuming responsibility as the sole ordinary or bishop of the diocese. Consolation, I think, was that it was part of the Midwest. So, it's just at the tip of Lake Michigan. Even though it's a different state, it was culturally similar enough to Milwaukee and to Wisconsin that I felt very much at home there. So Gary was a great start for me. It's a smaller diocese, so it wasn't like going from being an auxiliary to becoming Archbishop of Philadelphia or something. So it was a great move, certainly for me, and I enjoyed my time there.
So you're taking on a new role from being an auxiliary to being the ordinary. What resources did you have? Obviously, your predecessor was still in Gary. I'm sure he was a great resource to you. But certainly, were there any of your brother bishops from around the region, anybody that you could just call to say, what do I do in a situation like this?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say the other bishops in Indiana were certainly a great help to me, especially in meetings. I learned a lot, I think sometimes without realizing I was learning when I was an auxiliary in Milwaukee, just watching how Archbishop Listecki led the diocese, how different organizations, committees, structures within the diocese functioned, and how all that comes together. Learned a lot, again, without realizing it, from Archbishop Dolan when he served in Milwaukee. And also my mission experience of the Dominican Republic. I was in the Dominican Republic for almost 4 years, and our parish there was 50,000 people spread out in 27 villages. So I think God was preparing me to be a bishop because the parish was more like a diocese.
So you're learning your role as the ordinary of a diocese, but also what was it like learning a whole new region? I know there was certainly some similar culture being a Midwest, but certainly it's a whole new area with different challenges than perhaps you experienced in Milwaukee, just because every diocese almost seems to have a different personality, a different history, a different culture. And what was it like kind of moving from Milwaukee, where you were very familiar with, basically your home diocese, to learning a new diocese?
Yeah, I think God gave me an extraordinary grace because I wondered, will I feel at home there? Will I miss Milwaukee? And I have to say, even within the first couple of months, I felt very much at home in the Diocese of Gary. And part of that was just the warm, receptive welcome that I received from the people there. But I also think it was just a grace given to say that, I miss people in Milwaukee. Obviously, I miss my family, my friends, people I knew. But I really felt very much at home there immediately. I'm also not afraid just to plunge into a new situation and just explore and meet people and ask questions and to realize that, my stance, especially at the beginning, has to be one of learning, of listening, of realizing, history didn't start the day I showed up. And as you said, every diocese, just like every parish, just like every human being, is unique with its own history, its own personality, its own culture of church. I think many people think the Catholic Church is this monolithic organization where it's all the same. And while we're the same in the essentials, we're remarkably diverse in the local expression of the church.
Had it been, once you were serving as Bishop of Gary, was it your intention? It sounds like it was that, well, I'm happy being the Bishop of Gary until I retire.
Yeah, a large part of my spirituality is trying to live in the present moment and just to say, I'm here right now. This is where God is. Don't look over my shoulder. Don't look to the future. Just be right here. So part of the mystery of being a bishop is you could be in the same place for the rest of your life, or you could be moved in 2 months. And you really have no realization of what that is. So I think it'd be a big mistake to think, I'm just going to tentatively engage here, or I'm going to just be engaged here as if I'm only going to be here for a few years. Because what if you're there for 20 years? So for me, a large part of my approach to life is just living in the present moment.
It sounds like one of the major undertakings you had while you were in Gary was, we hear of the Synod, which seems to be a concerted effort to come together as a diocese, recognize our challenges, recognize the resources we have as a diocese to work together to address those challenges, but also relying on what is God calling us as a diocese to do to address these challenges. Could you just talk a little bit about the Synod in Gary?
Yeah, absolutely. So we had a synod in 2014 in Milwaukee, and I was fresh off of that experience, and I was very involved in that. And I saw the beginning fruit of it as I was leaving to go to Gary. And Gary had never had a synod in its history. And I don't think it's unlike any other diocese in the country. When I looked at the statistics of Mass attendance, sacraments, people coming into the church, First Communions, confirmations, marriages, all those metrics were going in the wrong direction. In some cases, too significant numbers. When we look at the Catholic Church nationally, I think we're down 50% in marriages in the last 20 plus years. Mass attendance has certainly slid. So really, the Synod was an effort both for the diocese to the parish to the people, and from the people to the parish to the diocese to prayerfully, creatively look at what the Holy Spirit is asking us to do, and really utilizing input of everyone to create a strategic pastoral plan, both for the diocese and for the parishes, to say, how can we revitalize the mission of our community? And I think Catholics all over the world are asking the same questions. How can I have a deeper relationship with the Lord? How can I explain my faith more effectively to others? How do I evangelize? And how do I help make my parish more vital, more welcoming, more what the church is called to be? So the Synod really grappled with all those questions and came up with some pastoral initiatives of how to respond.
So then you have this wonderful project going and much of it being implemented, and you get a call from the Apostolic Nuncio again saying, oh, by the way, you've been appointed as the 5th Bishop of Madison. What was that like?
Yeah, kind of a shock. It was on April 13th of this year. It was the Saturday before Palm Sunday. I've been getting a lot of robocalls, so this Washington, D.C. number kept coming up on my phone, and I didn't have time to answer it. Call came again that evening, so I finally answered it, and it was the nuncio. And, he said I'd been appointed here to Madison. And, I talked about all the things going on in Gary, and, we're in the midst of a lot of change. And I think, the Spirit works as the Spirit works in the church. So I think even in the midst of all the transition and implementation of the Synod that we're at in Gary, I firmly believe God is in charge. And so I was plucked from there and placed here. And I just trust that God is working there in Gary and continuing through the efforts of many good people and leaders.
And it must have been a little bit of a different transition, because certainly you have ties to Gary, and you're leaving, but you want to leave them in good shape. But at the same time, you were coming into a diocese that was really a diocese in mourning because of the way your predecessor had passed away fairly quickly and unexpectedly. Did that come into play with how, did you sense that there was a little bit of need of helping people getting through a mourning process, the people of our diocese, when you arrived here?
Yeah, when you look at it, there is a 5-month interval between Bishop Morlino's untimely and shocking death and my appointment, and that's really kind of lightning speed when it comes to the operations of the Vatican at times. So I think there was a sense of that, certainly, to help people to heal, and also that every diocese needs a bishop to serve and to lead and to love the people. So to me, it shows that certainly Madison is on the radar of the bigger church, on the radar of the Holy See. It's a significant see, and they certainly wanted to see it filled in a relatively quick fashion.
Well, it somewhat caught me off guard. Just how I found out, believe it or not, is if I wake up early enough at 5 a.m., I'll look at the Vatican Bulletin in Italian. And I don't know Italian, but you can kind of know enough to see what's going on. And I wasn't expecting anything. It was just 5 months. And I see something that says Bishop Hying. And I'm like, well, I know that name. I wonder where he's going. And then came out, oh my goodness, or something that it's at 5 in the morning. And my wife popped up and she said, oh, what's the matter? It's like, what happened? I said, no, it's good news. It's good news. And then only minutes after that, we started getting the email notifications from Monsignor Bartilla about the news. So it caught me off guard, too. But I think it worked out very good for both of us and all of us in the diocese.
Well, it certainly worked out well for me, so I'm happy to be here.
Well, one final question I'd like to think about, it's more of a bigger question, is looking back on your already fairly diverse experience as a bishop, from auxiliary in Milwaukee to ordinary in Gary and now ordinary in Madison, what have been the experiences in your life, maybe prior to you even being a bishop, that you most relied upon in your role as a bishop?
Something that struck me, Archbishop Dolan said once that he saw his role as bishop in a very clear connection to his experience as a pastor in a parish. And that really helped me think of, what does it mean to be a shepherd? And I think a bishop in a very special and particular way is both father and brother to his priests, to his deacons, to the religious, to the lay ecclesial ministers, and also to the people of God. And when I focused on that primacy of the pastoral, it really helped me to stay grounded, I think, because I thought, well, I was able to serve as a pastor in various parishes. This is just a bigger parish there. This is just a bigger stage. And in many ways that reassured me, because sometimes the administrative role of a bishop can seem daunting and overwhelming. And you realize God gives you the graces that you need. So I think it was really that connection to having been a parish priest, having been a pastor in various different parishes, that helped me to say there's a continuity here between what I've been doing and what I'm being called to do. And I think it helped assuage my fears or some of my anxieties.
Well, we're certainly pleased that God has graced us with your gifts and your experience, not only just for our neighboring diocese over in the Archdiocese of Milwaukee, but also in Gary and certainly now here. So we're grateful for that, and we look forward to many more conversations like these in the future.